Most people think waking up early is about discipline or productivity or some extreme lifestyle choice. But the real reason millions of people choose to wake up before the world is much deeper than that. It's about control. It's about claiming ownership over your mind before anyone else gets access to it. Because the moment the day begins, the world starts making demands, messages, expectations, noise, pressure. And if the first thing you do in the morning is respond to the world, you've already surrendered leadership over your own attention. When you wake up early, before the noise starts, something important happens psychologically. Your mind is quiet. It's not yet fractured by comparison, urgency, or other people's agendas. In that silence, you're not reacting, you're choosing. And that distinction matters more than most people realize. Reaction keeps you trapped in survival mode. Choice moves you into leadership mode. Early mornings give you access to that shift before your nervous system is overstimulated. There's also a philosophical truth here that often gets overlooked. The quality of your thinking determines the quality of your life. But deep, high-quality thinking requires space. It requires stillness. And stillness is almost impossible to find once the day fully begins. Early mornings create a protected environment where your thoughts aren't being pulled in 100 different directions. You're able to ask better questions. You're able to think about who you're mean, not just what you have to do. This is why early risers often seem more grounded. It's not because they're smarter or more talented. It's because they start their day with intention instead of interruption. When you decide how your morning begins, you quietly decide how your day unfolds. And over time, how your days unfold becomes how your life looks psychologically. Waking up early trained your brain to associate the morning with autonomy rather than obligation. You're not rushing. You're not behind. You're not chasing the clock. You're ahead of it. That creates a subtle but powerful shift in self-perception. You begin to see yourself as someone who leads rather than follows, someone who prepares rather than panics. And that identity doesn't stay in the morning. It follows you into every room you walk into. There's another layer to this that's uncomfortable but necessary to confront. When you wake up early, you're choosing to sit with yourself. No distractions, no excuses, just you and your thoughts. For many people, that's exactly what they've been avoiding. Noise becomes a coping mechanism. Busyness becomes a distraction. Early mornings remove those shields. They force you to face your doubts, your fears, your unresolved questions. But that's also where growth begins. You don't outgrow what you refuse to confront. Over time, this daily practice builds mental strength. You become more comfortable with silence, more comfortable with clarity, more comfortable with responsibility. And when pressure shows up later in the day, and it always does, you're not overwhelmed. Why it? You've already anchored yourself. You've already established internal order before external chaos arrives. This is why waking up early isn't a hack or a trend. It's a philosophy. It's a statement that says, my life is not an accident. My mind is not public property, and my future deserves deliberate thought. People who wake up early understand that if they don't decide how their day begins, someone else will decide for them. So the question isn't whether you can wake up early. The real question is whether you're willing to stop giving your best mental energy to everyone else and start giving it to the life you say you want to build. Because the moment you win the morning, you quietly start winning yourself after you've claimed the morning and taken control of your attention. The next decision matters just as much. What you choose to do first. This is where most people drift into comfort. And it's also where discipline is either trained or slowly erased. Doing the hard thing first isn't about punishment or proving toughness. It's about teaching your brain a lesson it will carry with it for the rest of the day. That you move by decision, not by feeling. Psychologically, the brain is always learning from your behavior. Every action sends a message about who's in charge. When you delay discomfort, when you negotiate with resistance, your mind learns that avoidance works. But when you face something difficult early, when there's no applause, no urgency, no external pressure, you're sending a different signal. You're teaching your nervous system that discomfort is not a TH. Reet. It's a signal for growth. This is why people who consistently do the hard thing early develop a different relationship with stress. They're not fearless, they're trained. They've practiced acting before motivation arrives. And over time, that practice rewires the brain. Research in behavioral psychology shows that repeated exposure to controlled stress increases resilience and reduces emotional reactivity. In simple terms, you stop flinching at difficulty because your system has learned it can handle it. There's also a philosophical discipline at work here. The ancient idea of self-mastery wasn't about eliminating struggle, it was about choosing it. When you voluntarily engage in something uncomfortable, physical effort, focused thinking, deep work, you reclaim authority over impulse. You're no longer ruled by convenience or mood, you're guided by values, and that distinction shapes character far more than talent ever will. Doing the hard thing first also changes how you experience the rest of the day. Instead of carrying dread or avoidance, you carry momentum. You've already proven something to yourself. You've already done what most people postpone. That internal win create. ES psychological leverage. Tasks feel lighter. Decisions feel clearer. Confidence becomes grounded, not inflated, because it's based on action, not affirmation. Many people misunderstand motivation. They think it's a prerequisite for action, when in reality, it's often the result of it. Action creates emotion, not the other way around. When you act in the absence of motivation, you train your mind to follow through regardless of internal resistance. Over time, this dissolves the myth that you need to feel ready to move forward. You realize readiness is built through movement. Early mornings amplify this effect because your mind hasn't yet built excuses. The mental narratives are quieter. The resistance is simpler. That makes it the perfect time to practice discipline without drama. You're not fighting the whole day, just one clear decision. And when that decision is consistently aligned with growth, your identity begins to shift. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and start seeing yourself as someone who does. There's also a deeper truth hidden here. When you avoid difficulty, you don't actually avoid pain, you postpone it. It shows up later as stress, regret, self-do. But when you face difficulty early, you convert short-term discomfort into long-term strength. You pay the price up front, and the return compounds quietly over time. This is why millions wake up early to do something hard while the world is still asleep. They're not chasing suffering, they're training sovereignty. They understand that the first intentional struggle of the day isn't just a tie, it's a message to the self. A message that says, I don't wait to be pushed, I choose to move. And when you teach your mind that lesson every morning, you don't just build discipline, you build an identity that can't be shaken by resistance, delay, or fear. After you've taken control of your attention and proven to yourself that you can act without waiting for motivation, there's another discipline that separates those who lead their lives from those who are constantly pulled by them. It's the discipline of separation. Before you interact with the world, you must separate from it. Before you absorb noise, you need a moment of clarity. And early mornings create the only window where this is still realistically possible. Most people don't realize how fragmented their minds have become. From the moment they wake up, they hand their awareness to screens, updates, opinions, and urgency. Psychologically, this puts the brain into a reactive state before it's fully awake. Instead of choosing their emotional baseline, they inherit it. And once your mood and attention are externally set, the rest of the day becomes a series of reactions rather than deliberate moves. Separation in the M. Morning isn't about isolation for its own sake. It's about orientation. It's about deciding who you are and what matters before you let the world weigh in. When you take even a short period of focused quiet, without notifications, without news, without comparison, you give your mind a chance to organize itself. Thoughts settle, priorities surface, and you start the day from a place of internal align. Int instead of mental clutter. There's a philosophical idea that says a person who cannot stand alone cannot think clearly. That doesn't mean rejecting society or responsibilities. It means recognizing that your inner world needs structure before it can handle external input. Early risers understand this intuitively. They protect the morning because it's the last space where your thoughts can STI. I'll be yours. From a psychological standpoint, what you expose your mind to first sets your emotional and cognitive tone. If the first stimulus is chaos, urgency, or comparison, your nervous system adapts to that frequency. Stress becomes the baseline. But when the first stimulus is calm, focus, reading, reflection, intentional planning, you're training your brain to operate from stability. That stab. Stability becomes a shield later in the day when pressure shows up. This is why people who start their mornings intentionally often appear unbothered by things that overwhelm others. It's not that they care less, it's that they prepared more. They didn't borrow their emotional state from headlines or timelines, they built it from the inside out. Separation also sharpens discernment. When you begin day in silence or focused thought, you become more aware of what truly deserves your energy. Not everything that demands attention deserves engagement. But if you don't take time to establish that filter early, you end up reacting to everything. Early mornings are where that filter is formed. There's an uncomfortable truth here as well. Many people fear separation because silence exposes misalignment. When you slow down, you start to notice where your life doesn't match your values. You feel the tension between who you are and who you say you want to be. That awareness can be unsettling. But avoidance doesn't remove the tension. It just numbs it. Separation forces honesty, and honesty is the starting point of change. Over time, this practice builds psychological independence. You stop needing constant input to feel grounded. You become less reactive, less defensive, less scattered, and that independence changes how you move through the world. You listen better. You respond more thoughtfully. You're harder to manipulate, rush, or distract. This is why separation must come before interaction. If you don't set the tone, the world will set it for you. If you don't decide what matters, everything will feel urgent. Early mornings are not about escaping responsibility. They're about meeting it with clarity. So before the world asks anything of you, ask something of yourself. Sit in silence, focus your attention, decide your direction. Because when you separate first and engage second, you don't just protect your peace, you protect your purpose. Once you've protected your attention, face discomfort, and separated from distraction, something powerful begins to form almost without effort. Momentum. And momentum is not just a feeling. It's a psychological advantage. It changes how you see yourself and how you move through the rest of the day. When you build progress while others are still asleep, you're not competing with them. You're separating from the version of yourself that used to wait. Momentum works because the human mind is wired to believe what it repeatedly experiences. When you start your day with forward movement, your brain receives evidence that you are capable, prepared, and in motion. That evidence shapes confidence in a way motivation never can. Motivation is emotional and temporary. Momentum is structural. It stays with you because it's built on CCM, not inspiration. Most people underestimate how much mental weight they carry simply from feeling behind. Rushing in the morning, reacting to demands, starting the day already late, it creates a subtle sense of failure before the day even begins. That feeling compounds. It affects decision-making, patience, and self-trust. But when you wake up early and move intentionally, the opposite happens. You feel ahead, not superior, just grounded. And that feeling changes everything. Psychologically, momentum reduces friction. Tasks feel less intimidating because you're already moving. Your mind is less likely to procrastinate because it's already in execution mode. This is why disciplined people often appear calm under pressure. It's not because they have fewer problems. It's because they've already established forward motion before pressure arrives. There's also a philosophical element here that matters. Progress builds meaning. When you make progress early, you experience yourself as someone who is actively shaping life rather than enduring it. That sense of agency is deeply human. It's tied to dignity, self-respect, and purpose. You don't need praise from others when you've already by proving something to yourself before sunrise. Early momentum also quiets the need for validation. When you've already invested in your growth, you're less reactive to criticism and comparison. You're not searching for confirmation because your actions have already confirmed your direction. That internal stability becomes a form of confidence that doesn't announce itself, but it's unmistakable. What's important to understand is that momentum doesn't require massive achievements. It requires consistency. One focused hour, one intentional action, one completed task that matters. Over time, those small wins accumulate into identity. You stop saying, "I'm trying," and start operating as someone who finishes, improves, and follows through. This is why early mornings are such a powerful training ground. They remove the noise of performance. No one is watching. No one is applauding. It's just you and the work. And that environment forces honesty. You either show up or you don't. There's no illusion to hide behind. And when you repeatedly show up in that quiet space, your self-belief becomes unshakable. There's also a deeper strategic truth here. When you build momentum early, the rest of the day becomes optional effort instead of forced survival. You're not scrambling to catch up. You're choosing how to invest energy. That choice restores a sense of control that many people have lost without realizing it. Momentum also changes how setbacks feel. When something goes wrong later in the day, it doesn't define you. You've already made progress. You've already won something internally. So setbacks become adjustments, not threats. That emotional resilience is built quietly, early, and daily. This is why millions wake up early, not because they enjoy sacrifice and sleep, but because they understand leverage. They know that progress made in silence creates confidence that speaks all day long. So ask yourself this: if you could start every day already moving forward, already proving something to yourself, already building belief, how different would your decisions become? Because when you stack momentum before the world wakes up, you don't just get ahead of others. You get ahead of your old limits. Momentum is powerful, but momentum alone doesn't sustain a life. What sustains a life is trust, specifically the trust you have in yourself. And that trust isn't built through big promises or emotional highs. It's built quietly through consistency. This is where waking up early every day stops being a productivity habit and becomes something deeper, a practice in self-respect. Every time you commit to waking up early and you follow through, you're sending your brain a message. You're saying, when I decide something matters, I show up. That message compounds. Psychologically, the mind forms its sense of identity based on repeated behavior, not intention. You don't become confident by telling yourself you are. You become confident by keeping promises to yourself when it would be easier to break them. Most people underestimate how much internal damage comes from self-betrayal. Every time you delay, negotiate, or excuse yourself from a commitment you made, it subtly erodes self-trust. You might not notice it in the moment, but over time, it shows up as hesitation, second-guessing, and doubt. You stop believing your own plans because history has taught you that you won't follow through. Early mornings reverse that pattern. They offer a daily opportunity to rebuild credibility with yourself. There's no external pressure forcing you out of bed, no immediate consequence if you don't show up, which means that when you do, it counts. It's voluntary integrity, and voluntary integrity strengthens character far more than forced compliance ever will. There's a philosophical truth here that's more affordable but necessary. You cannot respect yourself and consistently break your own word. Self-respect isn't about self-esteem slogans or positive thinking. It's about alignment. It's about your actions matching your values. When you say growth matters, discipline matters, your future matters, and then you act accordingly, you experience yourself as whole rather than divided. This consistency also stabilizes your emotions. When you trust yourself, you're less anxious about the future because you know you'll handle what comes. You're less reactive to setbacks because your identity isn't fragile. You're not constantly seeking reassurance because your behavior already provides it. That internal stability is rare, and it's built in small, unglamorous moments, like waking up early when no one is watching. Another psychological shift happens here that most people don't notice. When you stop relying on motivation, you stop being controlled by mood. Motivation is unpredictable. Some days it shows up, some days it doesn't. But consistency removes that uncertainty. You act because it's who you are, not because you feel like it. That shift from emotion-based action to identity-based action is one of the most powerful transformations a person can experience. Early mornings accelerate this shift because they strip away excuses. You can't blame the day yet. You can't say you were too busy. It's just you, the decision, and the follow-through. Over time, this trains a deep sense of self-reliance. You stop waiting for the right conditions and start creating them. And here's the paradox. The more consistent you become, the less force it takes. Discipline doesn't get heavier, it gets lighter. What once felt like effort becomes normal. What once felt impossible becomes expected. This is how ordinary habits turn into extraordinary character. This is why people who wake up early consistently carry themselves differently. There's a quiet confidence there, not arrogance, not noise, just certainty. They know they can count on themselves, and that knowledge influences every decision they make. So if you're looking for real confidence, stop chasing motivation. Start keeping small promises. Wake up early, show up consistently, and build a level of self-respect so strong that no circumstance can take it away, because once you trust yourself, everything else becomes negotiable. But your standards never do. When consistency becomes part of who you are, the morning stops being just a time slot and starts becoming a space for transformation. At this point, waking up early is no longer about checking tasks off a list. It becomes about becoming someone different. Because the most important work you can do in the morning isn't always visible, measurable, or immediately productive. Most people use their time only to produce, to react, to keep up. They focus on outputs. But the people who wake up early, year after year, understand something deeper. Before you try to manage your life, you have to understand yourself. And understanding requires reflection. It requires thinking without urgency. It requires time where you're not being pulled outward. Psychologically, ID. Entity is shaped by repeated moments of self-awareness. When you pause to reflect on your choices, your patterns, your values, you give your mind a chance to integrate experience into wisdom. Without that pause, life becomes a blur of activity with very little meaning. Early mornings slow the world down just enough for that integration to happen. There's also a philosophical distinction that matters. Here, doing versus becoming. You can stay busy your entire life and still never evolve. Becoming requires intention. It requires asking uncomfortable questions. Who am I reinforcing with my habits? What direction am I actually moving in? What kind of person do my daily choices create? These questions rarely get answered in a rushed day. They require silence and honesty. This is why the morning, so powerful. It's the only time when your mind hasn't yet been shaped by the demands of others. You can think in terms of principles instead of pressure. You can align your actions with long-term meaning instead of short-term urgency. And when you start your day from that place, everything you do afterward carries more weight. Early risers often journal, read, reflect, or plan, not because it looks productive, but because it is formative. They're shaping the internal framework that will guide decisions later. And when challenges appear, they're not improvising under stress. They're responding from a developed sense of self. There's another truth here that many people avoid. Becoming requires letting go of outdated versi, ons of yourself. Reflection reveals where you've outgrown old beliefs, old habits, old identities. That process can feel uncomfortable because it challenges familiarity. But growth always does. Early mornings give you the space to release what no longer fits before the day demands performance. Over time, this practice creates alignment. Your thoughts, values, and actions begin to point in the same direction. And alignment is powerful. It reduces internal conflict. It conserves energy. It makes decision-making simpler because you're no longer arguing with yourself. You know who you are and what you're building. This is why people who commit to intentional mornings often experience a sense of calm, even in high-pressure environments. They're not guessing their way through life. They've done the internal work. They've clarified their direction before the day tests it. The tragedy is that many people never give themselves the time to become. They stay trapped in cycles of reaction, always responding, never reflecting. Early mornings break that cycle. They create a daily pause where you can step back and shape your life from the inside out. So if you want more than productivity, if you want depth, clarity, and purpose, don't just wake up early to do more. Wake up early to become more. Because when you use the quiet hours to build the person who will face the world no longer defines you. You define how you meet it.